going on? What's going on, boxing fans? So over the weekend, we had some boxing, particularly one fight I wanted to touch on about. Again, this is Roberto Flack. Live hangouts I've been accustomed to be doing in the last, I would say, 2 weeks. After 5 o'clock, you can catch me on here for the most part. But on to the topic at hand, man. Gary Russell Jr., Johnny Gonzalez for the WBC Featherweight title. A lot of people going in this fight, man, thought Gonzalez was going to knock out Gary Russell Jr., and the complete opposite happened in short fashion as Gary Russell Jr. scores, I believe, a fourth-round TKO over the hard-hitting Johnny Gonzalez. But I think what the biggest story, and I think this translates into the notion that in today's world of boxing, the undefeated record, I think, like, and you've heard a lot of people from the past mention this, that it's not the make or break of, in your career, and I think Gary Russell proved that this past Saturday night. Gary Russell Jr., before he even fought Vasily Lomachenko, was noted as one of the best upcoming little guys, featherweight, bantamweight, well, he was featherweight, coming out. And you see the speed, and people would argue he's probably the fastest. He's got the fastest hands in boxing, along with Amir Khan. But when he fought Lomachenko, I think we did see the pattern that I've made mention to in the past, as far as some of these fighters, man, aren't being matched up that well, as far as being on the come up and slowly giving these fighters tests as they go along. With Gary Russell, he went through a streak of just fighting guys that weren't on his level, and then he gets put in there with a guy like Lomachenko, who's regarded as, next to Rigondeaux, as the greatest amateur boxer probably ever, or top 3, top 4. So Gary Russell's his competition went from here to here like overnight. And I think we saw that play out in that fight. But I think what got lost in that is the fact that in this day and age, man, I think a lot of fans forget that in boxing, and this goes back to the 40s and 50s and even to now, that a loss isn't that detrimental to your career, especially your first loss. Now, Gary Russell, he didn't get knocked out by Lomachenko. He did get outboxed, somewhat outclassed, but I think for the most part, a lot of the fans kind of wrote him off. They were like, oh, well, he was just a hype job, and, he's fast, but he doesn't have the power, and he's too small, and, he was overhyped. He didn't fight anybody. And I think a lot of that kind of translated into how people picked this fight, or at least saw this fight going. Now, with Gonzalez, I think, I don't want to say smoke and mirrors. Let me just say that. I mean, look, you gotta give Johnny Gonzalez credit for the knockout of Abner Mares. Abner Mares going into that fight, man, was a credible opponent. I mean, I don't think it was a fluke knockout per se. I mean, some people could say it was, because now in hindsight, people will say, well, Mares might just beat him outright if they fight in a rematch, or maybe that won't happen. That's just the funny thing about boxing, man. I mean, A plus B doesn't always equal C when other guys are matched up. But I think what happened was we saw, Gonzalez and what he did to Abner Mares, and, thinking that's going to translate into him doing the same thing to Gary Russell Jr. based on how Gary Russell looked against Lomachenko. But again, man, Lomachenko and Johnny Gonzalez are polar opposites as far as what they bring to the ring and the problems that would pose against a guy like a Gary Russell Jr. But what Gary Russell Jr. showed us, man, is that it's not, and I know this sounds cliche, and you've heard this so many times, and as the Rocky Balboa saying goes, it's not how hard you hit, it's how, or it's not hard you get hit, it's how hard you can hit and keep moving forward, and you know how that whole goes, but that whole saying goes. But again, it shows that Gary, you know, just because you have a loss on your record does not mean that that is the end of your career, as it showed with Gary Russell obliterating Johnny Gonzalez for the most part, and showed that he had the power, speed, movement. Everything was there for, at least for a lot of us who saw that in Gary Russell. We just didn't see it against the upper echelon of the division. Well, we saw it Saturday night against the WBC or the former WBC featherweight champion, and just like that overnight, man, Gary Russell is back in the picture. So as it stands right now, man, you got Lomachenko, you got Walters, and you got Gary Russell there. Now, with all that being said, do I think that Gary Russell should rematch Lomachenko right away? No. I think what this fight was a huge confidence booster for Gary Russell Jr., even more so than his comeback fight after the loss to Lomachenko. But I think this is a huge confidence booster, again, against a guy like Gonzalez, who is a power puncher. And you got to think now, Gary Russell is looking now into the future as, like, you know, bigger possibilities. And I think, honestly, if I were his matchmakers, I wouldn't put him in there with the likes of Walters or Lomachenko yet. I think both of those guys should be facing each other this year, meaning Lomachenko and Walters, which I think will make for an incredible featherweight matchup. I think Gary Russell should, at this point, you know, defend his title. Look, man, there's a potential Abner Mares Gary Russell Jr. fight that could be made if the if the proposed Abner Mares versus Leo Santa Cruz fight isn't made. But you know, that is likely to be made. I just don't know at the weight, you know, considering Gonzalez is at 122 still. But for Gary Russell Jr., man, I think for a lot of the younger fans, I should say, that maybe have been so used to or they're enamored by the fact that a fighter is undefeated and that if they lose, it's all over. I think this further proves, man, that is not the case. You know, it's more of how you prove yourself after a loss as opposed to you losing and then, like, it's all she wrote. You know, because I can go through, you know, I'm not going to spend an hour going through every single fighter that is a Hall of Famer, an all-time great that has taken an L and has come back to bring the fans back on board as far as saying, okay, you know, it's not over yet for this guy. But really, man, on a personal note, I love seeing things like this because I think, again, this shows that boxing is just one of those sports, man, that you never know. And you can't write a fighter off just off of one loss. And, you know, as it pertains to, you know, Mayweather-Pacquiao, and again, I don't like bringing this fight up so much, but again, it's just like the huge elephant in the room in the sport. When it deals with a guy like Pacquiao, again, you can't look at his losses and think just because he has losses that it's going to play a role in the fight with Mayweather. That would be a foolish thing to do. But again, that's boxing. I think this was a huge pickup fight or confidence booster for Gary Russell Jr. And he looked great, man. And I'm really looking forward to him potentially getting fights because he is a Heyman fighter. I like to see him on network television, man. I mean, I think his style is, I mean, it's a fan-friendly style in the sense of how fast he is, the combinations he throws. And look, man, he's got power at that weight. I think he showed it. But I think for Gary Russell Jr., this is the best possible outcome that he could have had next to just a dominant unanimous decision. But the fact that he went in and he took a guy like Johnny Gonzalez out, that, mind you, he's been knocked out before, but I think that this was a great outing by Gary Russell Jr. I think this was something that his team and himself needed to keep himself relevant and to keep him, well, I mean, now he's a WBC champion. He's got the green strap. So by many accounts, he's the guy he has the belt that everybody wants in that division. So I think Lomachenko is looking at him too down the line of, I want that belt and I beat him before. And Walters is probably looking at him too, like, yo, I want this guy as well. So it's only going to get more difficult for Gary Russell Jr. at this point. But again, congratulations to Gary Russell Jr. proving that a 0 or losing that 0 isn't the end of your career, man. And props to him and his team. And I hope to see him in the very near future, hopefully on one of these PBC cards. Because again, he is a Heyman fighter. But again, that's pretty much it for right now. I didn't want to go in too much depth with it, and I didn't want to go in too much depth with the Vanes and the Jermell Charlo fight. I mean, you can watch it on YouTube. Close fight, gave it to Charlo. It was a good scrap though. I just didn't want to spend too much time on it. There wasn't a lot to really get out of that fight. Besides the fact that Jermell Charlo is going to be one of these guys at 154 along with his brother. So any case, as I always say, subscribe, hit the links. Tonight, as I record this video, there will not be a GYGB boxing podcast. We're going to come back next week. And this weekend, we got some CBS cards, one CBS card, the premier PBC on CBS card that takes place 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time with Sakio Bika against Adonis Stevenson for the WBC Light Heavyweight Championship, which if Stevenson wins and Kovalev wins his upcoming defense, there's talk about a purse bid being set up possibly for April 17th as far as when the purse bid would begin for a possible or for a hopefully inevitable Adonis Stevenson or Sergey Kovalev, as I should say, Sergey Kovalev versus Adonis Stevenson unification, or I guess it would be an undisputed light heavyweight championship match that could take place in Montreal September 26th at the New Coliseum. So stay tuned for that. Hopefully that takes place. But this Saturday, the April 4th, PBC on CBS, 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 12 p.m. Pacific. So for all of you in the West Coast, it's going to be early fight. But as I always say, subscribe, hit the links, and I will be back, or I will be uploading in the next couple of weeks, maybe sooner, my official Mayweather versus Pacquiao prediction video. It's already been filmed. It's a little lengthy, but I hit some major points, gave a little history lesson for the casuals, because this video I'm putting both on Facebook and YouTube because of the fact that this is geared towards not only the boxing heads, but the casual fans that maybe need a little history lesson as far as both of those fighters are concerned. So stay tuned for that. But until then, subscribe, hit the links, and I'll be back with you soon. Peace.